So the Nothing Stops the Mission shirt is interesting. Like I'd forgotten about that. What happened was I was going through a rough time, man. My God, I was going through a rough time. And I can't remember who said to me something like, you got to keep going. Nothing stops the mission. I can't remember who it was. It might have been, now this is getting wild now. It might have been Bill Shields, who was at the time known as a Vietnam vet who was on Henry Rollins' 21361 label and who wrote this very intense poetry. He wrote a book called Human Shrapnel and a book called The Southeast Asian Book of the Dead about his time as a Navy SEAL, how he came home infected with Agent Orange, gave it to his daughter, and his daughter at age 6 got leukemia and died. And Shields would like beat the crap out of keyboards and type these poems, and Shields and I would write back and forth with one another, like handwritten letters, hyping each other up, like, you can do it, you can get through this, Greg. Yeah, you can get through this, Bill. We can get through anything. I think it was Bill Shields who said to me, nothing stops the mission. Okay, what's interesting is that Bill Shields turned out to be a complete fraud. He was never in Vietnam. He was never a Navy SEAL. He never had a daughter who died. All of it was complete and total bullshit. And all of his poems were fake, everything, the whole deal. And Rollins has had a lot to atone for in terms of the way that Rollins hyped him as the next greatest thing. But okay, that all aside, I think it was Bill Shields who said to me one day, never stop the mission or whatever. And I decided I'm going to put that on a shirt and then sell it and then hype myself up.
It was you on the back juggling. It was you on the back juggling, and you had like a pointed hat or something?
No. It was me with like, I had like this tuxedo-ish colorful shirt, and I was juggling fire, like a devil stick.
Yes.
Yeah. So I just did it to hype myself up. Nothing stops the mission. Greg Bennick, and on the back it said juggling spoken word activism, Seattle, Washington. Okay, so I made 20 of these, maybe 40. I don't even remember how many of these, and I sold them to my friends. And to this day, every once in a blue moon, and I just haven't made the mental connection. One of the agents that represents me for my keynotes, every once in a while, if we're having dinner, she'll say, all right, have a good night. Nothing stops the Bennick. She'll say that to me. Nothing stops the Bennick. And it's become this kind of catchphrase she uses. And I never relate it to nothing stops the mission, but that's exactly where it came from. And there we go. Another deep cut of the
You're
story.
welcome. You're welcome. That's where we're gonna put that. That's so trial forming. Talk to me.
Trial forms as headline, and based on the zine Headline Communications. And we didn't like the name because it was it was honestly too Greg centric. It was my zine. Why? It's not my band. It was all of us. So we tried to come up with a name, and my vote for the band name was not Trial at first. My vote for the band name was Earth Dies Screaming, which was the name of an obscure Atari 2600 cartridge. And I thought that Earth Dies Screaming was the perfect band name. In retrospect, I was right. Everyone else was wrong, because we should have been an Atari 2600 cover band with songs like Pitfall and Missile Command and Asteroids. But instead, we went this way with like, We Care About Things and
Right.
Mosh. I mean, come on. So somebody mentioned Trial, or I can't remember who came up with it. We found it and looked it up in the dictionary, thinking it's got to mean more than like the People's Court or whatever, right? It's got to be something different. And like definition number 6 was an effort or an attempt. And we were like, you know what, that fits. We're trying to play in a band. We don't know what we're doing. We're trying to, make a change, as it were, and we don't know what we're doing. Let's go with Trial. So we recorded our demo spring of '95. And I remember we played this show for the demo release, and we'd made like 70 demos, maybe it was 55 demos. I can never remember the exact number, but a pile of demos. And we had the demos there, and we played the show, and the demos sold out. And that was a moment where we all went, huh? That's cool. And then, kept playing. And there was a lot of lineup changes. Our first 7-inch came out on Crime Think, which is definitely a website cult movement that everyone should check out for political ideas at crimethinc.com, spelled CRIMETHINC.com, or it might be .org, or whatever it is. Crime Think, check it out. Point is, crimething.com. First record came out on Crime Thing, Through the Darkest Days, 1996. And then we played a show in Berkeley, California, attended by Mr. Michael Hartsfield. And Mike asked us to be on New Age for the Foundation record in 97. And then my voice died, basically, in 98. We had to cancel all the touring and everything we had planned. And then came back. I had a voice, as I mentioned earlier, recorded Are These Our Lives for Equal Vision. And yeah, I mean, I could go on and on and on and on and on, but that's the basics of it, is that, you know, the record came out on Equal Vision. We broke up shortly thereafter. And then it was a kind of a fascinating journey between then and coming back and playing so-called reunion shows, because when we were together, no one really cared. I mean, we played shows, but we drove around the country and played to 30 people a night. I mean, there was some good shows here and there, but it wasn't like, we weren't like a phenomenon band. We weren't like, you know, the biggest, we weren't Earth Crisis. We weren't even anything close, right? We're lumped in now with 90s bands who were much bigger than we were at the time because it was that time. But quite realistically, we weren't on many people's radar at the time. But I think what happened after we broke up, having put out Are These Our Lives, which admittedly is a solid record, I think that over time, people started to they were talking about it and, you know, just sharing the idea of it. And then the internet caught up with music, right? So the internet caught up to the point where you could share songs and then share an album. And by the time we came back around in 2005 for the reunion show, it had been 5 years of the internet catching up with what we were all doing. And people had shared that record wildly. And when we came back to play and were selling out these shows, it was because people had shared that record and learned the songs because of the internet and the way that the record proliferated. Is that the right word? Just spread around. Just spread around. It was pretty wild to see and unexpected. Again, unexpected. But yeah,
I got two.
That's the 5-cent version of the history of the band.
I got two questions for you.
Okay.
Number one, do you think that what also helps is people want what they can't have? So suddenly people start listening to that record. Oh man, you know, one thing about the internet, it gives you everything whenever you want it. Now, mind you, the internet wasn't maybe doing that then, but music, people were getting it. And then it's like, I want to see this band. Oh man, the band's not around anymore. But
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we were not around. They couldn't see us play. We were never a band that put out. You know, we still don't have social media, right? I mean, I think there's a Facebook page. I think so people, there just wasn't a lot out there, and we were, again, you know, kind of, you know, a band who was trying to do something and doing something political and social and whatnot. And at the time, we were, you know, running in circles that were more anarchistic, certainly, and more underground a little bit. And, you know, signing with Equal Vision was something that, and we never technically signed even with Equal Vision, but we just put out a record with Equal Vision. But I mean, doing the record with Equal Vision was a big step, as it were, because it wasn't Crime Think, it wasn't underground, right? And people couldn't find us, and they couldn't find anything about us. And Equal Vision never hyped the record. The only thing that Equal Vision ever did for or about the record, as I remember it, I might be remembering wrong, so apologies to Equal Vision if I'm remembering it wrong, but I remember there was an ad for Snapcase Boy Sets Fire, and it was this big, it was a magazine ad, like a 5x5 Snapcase Boy Sets Fire ad, and at the bottom it said, also coming soon, with a picture of Are These Our Lives cover, trial Are These Our Lives. I don't think there was any other ads ever done for that record. So no one knew about it. No one knew. You know, I remember there was a night, not a night, the night that we had finished recording the record, Are These Our Lives. We recorded vocals in Seattle. Blair Calababa was the recording engineer. We recorded in Seattle at Hansick AV. Then we went up to Canada and we recorded at a studio called Mushroom, and at a restaurant at a place called Hipposonic. We recorded at a restaurant. We ate a lot of food at the same time. But we recorded at Hipposonic. Anyway, the point is, then we mastered the record after doing vocals over an extended period of time because I was being really careful about my voice. And we stayed up all night mastering the record. And I remember it was 6 a.m, and Tim and I drove out of Vancouver, BC back to Seattle, which is about a 3-hour drive. In the world at that moment, there existed, I think, 2, let's just call it 2 copies, but I remember there only being 1 of Are These Our Lives? And it was on CD. I think we had two, because maybe we had one to play and one to send to the label, right? There were two copies in existence of the record. And Tim and I put one copy in to the CD player in my car at the time. And we listened to it beginning to end, and we didn't say a word. And I always remember the early morning dawn and just like the mist and the dew and the gray and the rain, and just driving home, listening to this record literally for the first time on the planet out of the studio. And it got to the end, and I remember looking over at Tim, and he looked at me, and we were both like, oh shit. And we just hit play and listened to it again, and we could not believe what we created. Like, we knew that something, all the lineup changes and the fighting and the creative challenges and all of it had come together in a way that we were like, oh, wait a minute, this might be actually really great. And I remember thinking that if Tim and I were the only people who ever heard that record, that I was satisfied. That the accomplishment of getting through everything we'd been through in terms of breakups and fighting and everything with the band, it was worth it if only Tim and me in that moment heard that record once or twice, as it were, after we listened to it a second time. And I just remember being so deeply satisfied by that, and therefore everything else that's come since, icing on the cake.